This is Double D in the Friday Morning, Episode 11, History of Cartoons, Part 2, The Evolution of Animation. Part 1, The Silent Era and Inking and Painting in Traditional Cell Animation. First there was the Silent Era, from the 1910s to 1927. This era of animation is when you really get to see animation evolve. Another Silent Era comedy that was a big breakout thing was the Alice comedies that lasted from 1923 to 1927. Oswald the Lucky Rabbit was the last big breakout thing from the Silent Era. It lasted from 1927 until 1928. At least under the Walt Disney name it did. Universal Pictures took it from Walt Disney and took the ownership. Part 2, Sound Era of Cartoons. November 18th, 1928 ushered in the sound era of cartoons with Steamboat Willie. In 1929, over at Warner Brothers, Bosco the Tonk Ink Kid, the first Looney Tune, was created. Although Bosco wasn't all that popular and didn't last all that long. The end of the era at Disney started in 1959, with Sleeping Beauty being their first test movie for Xerox. And in 1961 it was their first full movie, using Xerox animation, which is a different form of animation that's not traditional, and in my opinion doesn't look as realistic. The first full Xerox animated movie was 101 Dalmatians in 1961, which that movie alone was a whole nother kind of movie, because it was like an animated storybook. The importance of Xeroxing on the business side is Xeroxing was a whole lot cheaper, but it closed the ink and paint department of a lot of companies once they started using it, because they didn't need the ink and paint anymore. This part of the video is my Looney Tunes continued. What can be said about cartoon comedy without mentioning Tex Avery? Well, the fact is you just can't do that without mentioning Tex Avery. From 1935 to 1941, he worked for Leon Schlesinger, aka the Looney Tunes. There he created some of the best known characters of the Looney Tunes genre, the original classics: Daffy Duck, Bugs Bunny, Porky Pig, and Elmer Fudd. In 1942, he left Warner Brothers for MGM, and he worked there from 42 to 53. There he created such classics as Scurry Squirrel, the Screwball Squirrel, Droopy Dog, and the Hollywood Playboy, the Wolf, and the famous Red Hot Riding Hood character. Tex Avery was famous for his anything for a laugh type of cartoon comedy gags, and in his MGM years, he really pushed the censors and pushed the boundaries of comedy and what he could do. Part 3, the introduction of digital and CGI animation. The 1990s were a pinnacle for modern, newer versions of animation. In 1995, Pixar made the movie Toy Story, and it turned the entertainment world on its head, revolutionizing the entertainment industry as a whole, especially with animation. They've been doing CGI animation for 26 years since and haven't looked back. Meanwhile, the last little bit of traditional ink and paint and cell animation was replaced by digital animation in the 90s. Because with that Xerox stuff, you still had a very similar kind of animation that you had before Sleeping Beauty or 101 Dalmatians. It was that, but just done at a cheaper budget. Xerox, I mean. While digital was completely done by the computer. The inking, the painting, the design of the character. Digital art and animation for 2D animation was groundbreaking. And with digital animation, they can get the cartoons done a whole lot quicker too. Stop motion animation made a comeback in 2005 with Robot Chicken. Stop motion animation had its heyday in the 60s and 70s in those Rankin and Bass holiday specials, but in previous years had tethered down. Robot Chicken brought it back to the forefront. Robot Chicken has been airing on Cartoon Network's late night block Adult Swim for 16 years. They're currently in their 11th season, and that is a version of old-fashioned animation that is still done to this day, and is great cartoon comedy. But I had to include it in this cartoon evolution. South Park was another 1990 show that was made in a very similar way to the '05 show, Robot Chicken. It was originally made with construction paper, and they were like little construction paper puppets, and they were animated in a stop motion similar way. But now they use digital animation. I love the writing on that show. I love how it stays current. The show's a bit nasty, but it stays current because it takes a week to do each episode. So they always stay current to the news and stuff. Great writing on South Park. Well, that's it for today's Double D in the Friday Morning, Episode 11, History of Cartoons Part 2, The Evolution of Animation. Stay tuned for History of Cartoons Part 3 next Friday, when I talk about the racial history in cartoon animation. And if you like this video, remember to follow me on Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, and Instagram. Also, give me suggestions in the comments or on social media of what you want my next playlist to be. And also remember to follow my other channel, A Slice of Life with Drew Moore, which will also be in the comments.